Well, hi, and thanks for joining us here. This video is the full version of an interview that I did with Matt and Andrea Vaughan. If you don't know Matt and Andrea, they are serving in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, with Interserve, and they are what we call mission or ministry partners with our congregation, St.Andrews, Islington, here in Etobicoke, the west end of Toronto. We showed a portion of the interview as part of our Sunday worship service for St.Andrews, Islington, our congregation. And if you'd like to watch the worship service and see that, there will be a link at the end of this video to that. But we wanted to be able to show the full interview, which is more like 45, 50 minutes, which was a little too long for our service. So that's what this is here. We'd love for you to like or share or subscribe if you think the video is good and you would like to do that. But I don't really want to say much more than that. I think you're going to enjoy hearing from Matt and Andrea and the experiences that they've had, the uncertainties that they've faced, but also their experience of God's grace and God's guidance and God's presence in the midst of all of their uncertainties. And so I offer you this video, Matt and Andrea Vaughan. Okay, well, Matt and Andrea, thank you so much for taking some time and joining us and being part of our worship service. For those who are watching, if they don't realize that you in Malaysia and me in Toronto were actually exactly 12 hours apart. So it's 9 p.m. for me and 9 a.m. for you. That's a little odd just in itself. But listen, we're so glad that that you're able to spend some time and check in with us. Now, just as we get started, I know there's some people who are going to be watching this who haven't met you before, don't know you, or maybe know you just a little bit. So if we could just start, if you'd be willing to just take a little bit of time and introduce yourselves, introduce your family, just who you are and things like that, just to get started with an introduction.
So I'm Andrea, and obviously this is Matt. And I grew up in Pakistan as a Mish kid back in the 80s. Moved back to Canada when my younger sister required education back there. And then pretty much the day I graduated from university, headed out overseas again as a missionary. I was in the Middle East to start off with, and it was at a conference there that I met Matt. Matt is from the UK. So we met, and that was that. No. And about 9 months after we met, I ended up getting kicked out of the country that I was serving in, lost my visa, and so had to, in the airport deportation lounge, come up with a very quick backup plan, and ended up moving in with Matt's parents.
Okay.
We were married shortly after that. And lived in the UK for the first 2 years of our marriage as we prepared to go overseas as a family. Left for Pakistan in 2011. At that time, we had one child, our eldest, Sam, who is now 10. And we're expecting our second, Ellie, who is now 8. We lived in Pakistan for almost exactly 8 years. In which time we had 2 more kids as well, Hannah, who is currently 6.5, and Daniel, who is currently 4.5, and ended up getting kicked out of Pakistan. So either it's me or something, but countries seem to like turfing me out shortly after we arrived. So yeah, we lived in Pakistan for 8 years, and we had to leave because of visa issues. And so we are now in Malaysia, and we've been here for almost exactly 1 year. May 8th last year we arrived. So basically just celebrated our 1 year arrival in Pakistan.
Wow. In Malaysia.
In Malaysia, not Pakistan.
Yeah. I can bet that it would be hard to know what country you're in sometimes. But
yes.
Well, congratulations on your 1 year anniversary. Now, so you're in Malaysia, you're working with Interserve. InterServe is a mission organization, but can you give us a little bit of information on who is InterServe? What kind of work do they do?
Yeah, as you say, InterServe is a long-term mission organization. It was founded in India in 1851, so it's quite old. Wow. Actually, as organizations go. It's really a long-term mission organization, so people go long-term. You know, it's always been the way InterServe works. Working in Asia and the Arab world, so these cultures take a long time to learn the language and to kind of become part of the culture. So long-term mission is really the viable model for InterServe since its beginning. To be honest, over video is the kind of thing we can't talk that much about. Unfortunately, that's one of the frustrations of InterServe in terms of the security of some places where we work. So Malaysia is pretty okay to talk about, and so is Pakistan, but some of the other countries are not. But people use their professional skills to really model the values of Jesus Christ among the peoples of Asia and the Arab world. So there are people who go as teachers, or go as doctors, or physiotherapists, or really anything at all. Because we believe that you can and should live out the values of the kingdom of God through your professional skills, as in every other area of your life. So that's what we've been doing for the last 9 years now.
Wow, nice. So 9 years, 9 years with InterServe, and so you've been connected with St.Andrews for a number of those years as well. How long have you been with St.Andrews? What was it that got you connected to St.Andrews, Islington?
My parents. So my parents are Craig and Krista Shugart, who, have long ties with St.Andrews.
Yeah, I think we've probably been connected for about 4 or 5 years. I don't exactly remember, to be honest. It was one of our home assignments, but we're very grateful for the connection we've had and the 2 or 3 visits we've had to the church and preaching and sharing about some of our work and just getting to know some of you guys as well. So just really grateful for that connection. Yeah.
No, we've loved the visits that you've had with us, and sorry that this visit is such an odd one, really, but really a wonderful one. One of the things I always remember about you coming to St.Andrews, Matt, is just the height of the pulpit. And for those of you who have never met Matt, you have to understand Matt is a rather tall person, and I'm not. So, and the pulpit is at a certain height, a good height for me. When Matt stands behind it, it looks like it's almost at his knees. Now that's an exaggeration, but that's just one of the funny things that I remember about some of your visits to St. Andrews. Now, anyway, you spoke about, getting back on track here, you spoke about being in Pakistan for 8 years with InterServe and now Malaysia. So we've heard a bit about InterServe, but what is the work that you have been doing in Pakistan and now in Malaysia?
Yeah, I mean, I did several things in Pakistan. One, probably the main one, was working with a Christian media organization. So we're producing evangelistic films mostly in Urdu and the other languages of Pakistan. There's not many Christian organizations that are based in Pakistan using media to reach Muslim people, but that's what we were trying to do. I also work with the Christian seminary. They're training pastors and evangelists, men and women, for the church in Pakistan. So I was involved in a governance role with that, trying to oversee that and ensure that the ministry grew and thrived and was successful. In my spare time, besides having 2 jobs and 4 kids, I wrote 2 books on Pakistan towards the end of our time there, as a way to kind of talk more positively about Pakistan and have a more kind of respectful dialogue with Muslim people, which were quite successful. And that was really fun, quite strange bit of ministry, having different speaking engagements with politicians and soldiers and journalists and people who aren't normally reached by mission work in Pakistan. So a mixture of stuff. It was all interesting.
Yeah.
And I had a ministry with Pakistani women, mostly those who were mums of our kids' classmates. But towards the end of our time in Pakistan, I was actually working full-time at the kids' school as well, helping them to better integrate literature into their curriculum, helping them to create a more approachable Urdu curriculum, and also helping them to figure out how to integrate special needs education better into the classroom, working alongside teachers and doing things in that area. So I did a bit of a bit of everything.
Yeah.
It all started because I was volunteering at school to help them build their library, and then just slowly, the principal and I became closer friends. And my last 2 years there, she had asked me to come on full time, which I actually really enjoyed. I never thought I would get into education, but it turns out that's currently my career path. So.
And you're working with a school in Malaysia as well now, is that right?
Yes, I am. So the school that our kids go to, it's called Rockland, and it started 4 years ago. Mostly the initial vision was because missionary families, worker families in Malaysia really struggle with education for their children. Government public schools are not accessible. They're not allowed to attend them. And aside from that, there's the international school market, which is highly overpriced for the most part. And those that aren't overpriced, the education tends to be quite poor. And when you keep in mind that most of the worker families come from countries where the government is paying for their kids to be educated in a decent public school system, to come here and have to pay $5,000 per semester per child to receive a rather poor one is quite galling. So Rockland was started it was originally kind of a bit of a homeschool co-op type thing, which then grew. And then slowly, I think within the first 6 months, we had a bunch of refugee families who are some of the worker families were linked with, who were also looking for education opportunities for their children. Malaysia has a lot of refugees, but does not have any educational support system for them. So there are no schools provided by the state or education provided by the state for all the refugee children.
Okay.
So they started coming along, and it became this international community, education community. In the last 2 years, they've been working towards becoming an international school, not to join the money makers, but to kind of provide an antithesis to that, like good education, affordable, not only for the locals, but, or not only for the refugees and worker families, but also for locals. We have almost all worker family teachers, so Christian teachers. It's not a solely Christian school, but they come at education, and they come at children's mental health and all of that from a kind of Christian perspective. Yeah, so we now have 50% of our students are from missionary families or Christian ministry workers in Malaysia. And then 30% are refugees who we try and get scholarships for from abroad. And then the remaining are locals. So in the last year, we've been working towards getting our international school license. The expansion, all of that requires a lot of work, a lot of money. We have to move from a 5,000 square property to a 50,000 square foot property. Yes, so there's just a lot of stuff that goes on, and I've been on the principal and is on the academic side. I'm on the business side, trying to move things along on that end. And
did you just kind of pick this up when you arrived in Malaysia? Was this what brought you to Malaysia, or Matt, was it the work that you were doing that brought you to Malaysia? How did that transfer happen?
Yeah, I suppose the initial impetus was when, during this sort of 1.5 or 2 years we spent trying to maintain our visa in Pakistan and failing, obviously, eventually. Eventually we were asked to, I was asked to become the International Communications Director for Intercert. So they've struggled for about 10 years to get a communications director. And so I love communicating and, in writing and in film and other mediums as well. So I was happy to do that. We didn't want to leave Pakistan, but, when it became obvious that we had to, that was a good option. And so it's been interesting. It's been kind of personally very, very exciting and thrilling, because you get firsthand or secondhand some of the amazing stories of what God's doing through Intercert around the world. But then it's quite challenging because you've got to find a way to convey that to the broader body of Christ around the world without, ruining the security restrictions that exist in a lot of the places where we work.
Yeah.
So it can be challenging. We're trying to find ways to communicate more intelligently and boldly. I think Ralph Winter, who's a senior missiologist, once described INSEB as one of the best kept secrets in world mission, because no one's ever heard of it, but they're often doing very pioneering work in some very hard to reach places. So that's kind of my challenge, really, is to see how we can make it less of a best kept secret and more well known.
Sure. Well, that's what communicating is all about, I suppose, is getting the word out there. Yeah. No. So yeah, visa problems have obviously been something that you've been struggling with for quite some time now. I don't know if you know this or remember if I shared this with you, but that's part of my story as well. I was actually born in India, and it was because of visa problems that I didn't end up growing up there. I was just a baby when my family left, and came back to Canada, then England, and anyway, whatever. It's not my story we're here to talk about, but so I do have some, a distant experience myself of visa problems. But you've been dealing with this for quite some time now in Pakistan and now Malaysia as well. So, like, what is your current status in terms of visas, and are you there long term, or where are you going next, or just everything like that?
If I get deported from Malaysia, or asked to leave, then it will be the 4th country that has asked me to leave since I was born. India, Pakistan, Cyprus, and here. So,
Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge. I mean, we, INSEB being what it is, and our calling being what it is, we wanted to go long term. So it was never our desire to leave after that many years. I mean, these days, missions become increasingly short term, and so going 2 or 3 years is seen as long term mission. I mean, back when INSEB started, you went for life essentially, and that's how it was. So yeah, I mean, things haven't worked out as we would have wanted. It was very painful having to leave Pakistan. I think if we'd have been forced to leave after the first year, I would have kind of shrugged my shoulders and said, well, we tried and too bad. But after committing to relationships and committing to the language and the culture and really falling in love with the place, it was very painful. There's no point trying to disguise that. It was a very painful time. I mean, it's an increasing theme around the world. In lots of countries, it's getting harder for expatriates to maintain visas, even places where it was historically quite easy, like India, as you say, or Nepal or Pakistan. For a range of reasons, it's getting quite hard. And so that is a challenge. It's one of the things about modern mission. We certainly hope to be long-term in Malaysia because, again, long-term is a thing, really. It takes time to invest in cultures and relationships and languages. So we've been working on that for a time. Malaysia does have a visa platform for us. It just involves a lot of paperwork and investing a lot of money in Malaysia in a bank account, which someone's loaned us because we don't have the money ourselves. So that's okay, but it just takes a lot of time and a lot of bureaucracy. So it's been a challenge. But certainly that's our desire, is to be here long term. Will be our preference for sure.
Yeah. Wow. And so, I mean, I imagine, speaking of like needing visas and moving from country to country and in many other ways, just our current situation with COVID-19, how has that impacted you in terms of your visa needs, in terms of your family? I mean, obviously you have 4 kids at home. We have overheard your kids in the background. That's wonderful. It's just so great to hear them there as well. But just how are our current circumstances impacting you, your work, your family right now?
So yeah, one of the complicating factors for us is that obviously Andrew's Canadian and I'm British, so we don't currently have permission to return to one home country. Most people have that option. They can go back to the UK or go back to the States or Canada or wherever. We don't have that. And so currently, as it stands, we could go to Canada I can be there for 6 months, or Andrea can be in the UK for 6 months. But after that, we have to make a decision and start applying for a residency. So that's one of the additional complications for us.
Yeah.
While we waited for our visa platform to come through, so it's called Malaysia My Second Home. It's kind of intended for retirees, but we're very young retirees.
Young retirees, I like it. Sure, why not?
So while we waited for that paperwork to come through, we were coming in and out on tourist visas. And Malaysia tends to be fine with that for about a year. And then they start to kind of question you as you come through immigration, and you're at risk of being turned back at the border. So actually the COVID thing has been quite a hindrance in that. So we were due to leave in March, just to do a visa hop, which need to be 10 days. We were due to leave to go to Cambodia. So we were going to spend 10 days in Cambodia and then come back, and that would reset the 3-month clock. And then we were going to do home assignment for 2 months, and that would reset the clock. Right. And knowing that by the time we came back from home assignment in Canada, our paperwork for our MM2H would be well in the, being processed, and we would probably only have 3 more months before that was stamped in our passports. And that's a 10-year visa, so that would have given us a lot of stability.
Yeah.
But
something you haven't known before, seemingly.
Exactly. It would have been quite the shock to our system.
Yeah.
So our visa run obviously was taken away from us as countries started to shut their borders. And the first thing Malaysia did was say that no tourists could come. So we knew that if we left and did a visa run, we were not going to be able to get back into the country. And so we decided to forego our visa run. And then, of course, the country went on lockdown, which meant that all the ministries that would be processing our paperwork went on, were shut.
Of course. Yeah.
And in that time frame, our visa paperwork, a bunch of the documents that we had collected have expired. Which means that now Matt has to return to the UK and get new copies of them, new versions of them. But if he returns to the UK to get them, he has to get them in person. If he returns to the UK, he can't come back into Malaysia.
Right. Yeah.
So we're kind of at this weird, we have everything absolutely lined up, all our ducks in a row for this MM2H application, but we're unable to submit it, and we can't get the last of the paperwork, because if we do, then we can't come back in.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a bit frustrating. It's also affected our work. School moved to being online only. As a school, we opted to make that decision a week before the country actually went into lockdown, just recognizing that with our refugee population, quite a few of them live in close, the self-isolation, and that is not really a possibility for them. And we have 2 of our staff are also refugees, so we wanted to be extra careful.
Sure. Yep.
It also then, of course, all our expansion plans froze as businesses shut down, and the banks shut, our investments froze for a while. At the moment, we're sitting on this massive cliff because we don't know when Malaysia will reopen its visas again. So we don't know when they will start allowing foreigners back into the country, which means that a lot of our teaching staff who are planning on or coming in September or August to teach at the international school are now stuck in the US or the UK or Canada, unable to know if they can actually come back before December, which is the current rumor for when they will reopen. We don't know if the Ministry of Education will actually finish filing our international school application. We don't know how many of our students are going to have to leave because their visas will expire. We don't know if we can have any new students join us because they might not be able to get visas. So it's just been, it's been such a chaotic time, and everything is so far out of our control that actually you just kind of have to shrug your shoulders and go. Eventually these balls will start falling, and hopefully they fall into a pattern that we can recognize and don't disintegrate on the ground.
Wow. A lot of uncertainty for you guys. Wow. So for us at St.Andrews over the last few weeks, it seems to me that when we get into really changing circumstances, something that I'm sure you've already spoken a bit about and could tell us an awful lot about through your married and life experiences. But one of the things that I think we need when we're facing changing patterns is just the need for good, solid biblical guidance, and so we've actually been looking at Romans chapter 12 and looking at the just very solid, practical, hands-on kind of advice and guidance that it gives. That's how we've been looking at this. And so I just wanted to ask you, whether it's from Romans 12 or whether it's from some other place biblically or whatever, do you have any words of encouragement for us? I certainly would like to share words of encouragement with you as well, but I'm going to start by asking, do you have any words of encouragement that you want to share out of your experience? How have you seen God at work through these kinds of things that have been going on in your lives?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, Romans 12 is a very precious passage to both of us. Andrew's just gone to deal with a crying child.
Yeah,
so sorry,
of course. No, that's fine.
Yeah, we had most of this passage read out at our wedding in Toronto, actually, in 2008. This is a very, very personally meaningful passage for us. Yeah, I mean, I grew up an Anglican. My parents are ministers in the Church of England, and so I listened to the Anglican liturgy every Sunday, almost from birth through. And there's a phrase in the liturgy of living sacrifices. We offer you our souls and bodies as living sacrifices. And I used to hear that every Sunday and used to kind of wonder what that meant, because it's so contradictory. The point of a sacrifice is it is given away or it dies. So for it to go on living is just a very kind of contradictory statement to make. I mean, a friend of mine on Facebook last night posted a thing. He's a kind of thinking missional practitioner in the UK. And he kind of said, how as Christians can we go on living intentionally and missionally in a very uncertain context? And I thought about it and then replied, well, pretty much the entire Bible is written in that precise context. I mean, there's not many examples of stability and comfort in the Bible. There's lots of examples of uncertainty, challenge, difficulty, suffering. So living for Jesus in a missional sense, or in the context of discipleship, is not something that's kind of done out of suffering, out of difficulty. It's done through that, kind of breaking through those circumstances. And it has been hard. I'm not gonna gloss it and say this is a very easy thing to do, because it's been very hard. The last few years have been really challenging when you have a calling and you commit to a place like Pakistan and go through all the difficulties and the adjustments to that, and fall in love with it and see ministries thriving and exciting opportunities to reach unreached people in a new way for both of us. And just as it's getting exciting, it's taking away. It's difficult. In the same sense, I suppose, being in Malaysia and seeing the opportunity with refugees. The refugees here from almost every country in the world. There are just thousands and thousands of people from Myanmar and Iran and Yemen and Syria and Iraq, and there's amazing openness and freedom to reach them with the gospel, actually. But again, without a visa, we can't remain here. So again, that uncertainty and that confusion. And so dealing with uncertainty has been a thing for us. We've been married for 12 years this summer, and in that time we've known, I think the longest visa certainty we've had has been 2 years.
Wow.
So at no point have we known, other than that, for more than about a year, where we can be living in the country. And for the last year, it's been 3 months. No, for the last 2 years, it's been 3 months at a time. And so there is this kind of, from a human perspective, and I often do this, I just panic, because you look at it and think it's terrifying. We can't even go back to one country. I mean, it is scary. And when the kids come to us and say, how long are we going to live in Malaysia? And I want to say 5 years, 10 years, but I can't like them. I don't know. And so I say, I don't know. And that is difficult. But then there's this instruction in Romans 12 to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And that's something which came very powerfully to both me and Andrea. Andrea was on a women's retreat, actually, weren't you? And this line is very powerfully spoken to her. And it's a conscious decision, to renew your mind. I mean, if we had a human mind and looked at our circumstances, we would be panicking, and I often am panicking, to be quite frank. I'm not. she'll nod and smile. I'm really not going to gloss that. There's no easy answers to this. It is difficult sometimes, but it's a conscious decision to kind of set aside our human standards and our human ways of looking at the world and our human understanding of what's going on, and to take on the mind of Christ, which sees beyond all these kind of temporary inconveniences and difficulties, and looks beyond that, you know. And we see that in Scripture when people face difficulties, but they keep the mind of Christ and persevere, and eventually, you know, God comes through and they see his plan coming out. We don't see his plan coming out right now because we don't have, you know, we can't see the future. But we do have the assurance from Scripture that God's nature is the same, that he's faithful, that his word is always true and doesn't change, and it's always helpful for us. And so I guess that's the assurance we take on. It's really it's not a one-time thing I'm witnessing. You don't just kind of hand your life over to God once and then and that's it. You know, it's almost a daily thing for me.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, just trust God every day with a new bunch of scary stuff, a new bunch of uncertainty, and let God have his way with that day, and then do it again the next day. You know, it's a kind of conscious act of discipleship, I think. And that's what transforms us from fear, which we could have, and I often do have, to a more confidence in God and in his nature and his plans for our lives. So that's the difference between what could be despair and what could be hope.
Right. Wow, it's almost like, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but it's like you have received and are receiving the gift of uncertainty, and it doesn't seem like a gift, I'm sure, but maybe it's during those times that we particularly remember that it's God who leads us through. You know, in our service, we're going to be singing in a little bit, "Trust and Obey." You know, for there's no other way but to trust and obey. And it's those times when perhaps we are forced to rely on God in a way that we, in our comfort, in our normal lives, the comfort and the certainty that we think we have, we think it's our certainty, when in fact, you know, God is the one calls us to turn to him. The other thing, if I may, if this is a word of encouragement to you, this past Sunday, Romans chapter 12, verse 9, we just looked at the one short verse, and it says, love must be sincere. And, you know, literally that word sincere means unhypocritical. But it really means like not an act, you know, like you can't wear a mask. Love can't wear a mask. And from reading your newsletters, guys, and just I know some of the relationships that you have formed with whether it's refugees in Malaysia or just friends and neighbors in Pakistan, I know that this is, it seems to me that this describes your approach to ministry and to life, is to just not wear a mask and to allow, as much as, you know, the grace of God will allow, is just to allow his light and life to shine through you and your family and your lives. And so from a distance, from someone who really just for the most part reads your newsletters and gets that information at a distance, so I hope that's an encouragement to you, that that's something that I see in you and very much appreciate the work that you're doing and the lives that you're living among the Malaysian people now. And yeah. So what is next? What is next for the Vaughan family? I guess we've probably established that you probably can't answer that question with a great degree of certainty. But if it was up to you to just kind of snap your fingers and say, okay, here's what we want to happen over the next year, 5 years, 10 years. Again, you might have answered this question a little bit already, but what's next for the Vaughan family?
Well, if you had asked us, so it's an interesting thing. This is kind of going a bit back to the last question in a sense. But just like Matt said, if we had had a visa refusal after a year in Pakistan before I was kind of already head over heels for Pakistan, but before Matt had fallen head over heels for Pakistan, it would have been quite easy to just say, well, we tried and we're going to leave. And if our visa, you know, if all of this had happened 6 months into our time in Malaysia, it would have been probably quite the same thing. It would have been, okay, well, we told the international office that we were going to try Malaysia, and guess what? It's not working. So we'll figure something else out. But God has an uncanny way of waiting for us to just begin to fall in love with the country before he starts throwing loops at us. And so, you know, in this sense, Matt meeting, you know, meeting some really key people to sort of deepen his desire to stay here with Hussein. And the school project, kind of just before the virus hit, we reached a point where I really had to just say, yes, no, we are committed to this. I can't now just pack my stuff and flee, leave. I'm committed to this project. It was just after all of that these curveballs started getting thrown into the mix. So at the moment, we do really feel it has to be Malaysia. I've committed to Rockland, and this Rockland expansion project is something that could transform education for missionary families and refugees across Southeast Asia. And both of those are growing populations. The missionary families, education is one of the major reasons that they head back. Boarding schools are no longer seen as viable options. And so really international schools or equivalent are really the only option left to a lot of them. The other benefit to an international school is it gives a lot of worker families visa platforms, because their children can get student visas and then the parents can accompany them.
Sure.
So it's, it could transform the number of families and the length of ministry that people could have in this region of the world. So it's quite it could be a massive movement around here. And it's quite exciting to be part of that and to dream about a big future and trust in that big future. So yeah, I'd like to say 3 years, the international school here will be thriving and we'll be planting them in other Southeast Asian countries. 10 years, we'd be doing the same thing, only with a couple of our kids off in university in Canada or the UK. So that would be what we would like to be doing. Matt really does enjoy communicating about what InterServe is doing, and there is a lot of communicating to do. InterServe exists not just to plant churches in these areas. It also exists to help the churches in our sending countries to be connected to mission, but also have a heart for it, grow in passion for it, raise new missionaries, connect all of these pieces together. Matt, as a communicator, that's what he does. And there's so much that can be done in that. So we don't see an end to either of our jobs at all. That being said, we are 100% open to God's leading. And, just because Pakistan happened the way Pakistan did, and yes, we fought for visas for a long time, but ultimately got to stay for 8 years rather than 2 years, doesn't mean that will be the same thing here. Perhaps we're being taught a different lesson this time around. There is absolutely no way of knowing. So yeah, ideally, we're committed to the country we're in at the moment. But really, we're flexible. We'll see where God takes us. It's so much relies on what happens internationally at the moment, and how governments respond, and when they open their borders and who they open their borders to again. So it really is just a wait and see, and be patient, and realize that actually we are immensely privileged in that our salaries and our support doesn't drop away on the whim of one boss deciding he's not making a profit anymore. And that, yes, compared to a lot of people, we are not wealthy, but compared to many who are struggling to even, put a single serving of rice on the table for each of their family members these days, we have been incredibly blessed in this time. We've had more family time than we've ever had before. Blessing curse, not
Yes.
sure.
Yes, both ends.
Both ends. Some days one more than the other. But, you know, and we can flee back to Canada or the UK. We do have that safety and security, and, you know, so it's not too bad. It seems crazy, but it's just not too bad.
One of the really exciting things I think now is in my role is that really for the first time probably in human history, the church is starting to look like the vision in Revelation chapter 7. People from every tribe and language and nation worshiping God. It's never really happened before, but now it's happening. And even in the last year, we've known, you know, believers from Afghanistan in Malaysia and believers from Syria and Iran and all kinds of places, Yemen, all sorts of stuff, where it's very hard to reach if they're in Yemen or Afghanistan, but when in Malaysia, there's always freedom to reach them. And so it's really exciting to be doing this kind of communications role to tell these stories of what God's doing around the world, around the nations. That is really exciting, you know, for the first time in history, it's starting to look like that.
Wow.
Now it's hard to tell the stories because of security, but it's also very, very exciting. So the opportunities are really thrilling. So we definitely are committed to this. It's just whether the Lord will permit it to go on.
Well, there are certainly people here at St.Andrews, and I'm sure in many places, who are praying very specifically for you and are aware, again, through your newsletters and of the circumstances that you're facing. And just our chat here today, I think, is going to help those people know how to pray more specifically for you and for InterServe. But are there other things we haven't spoken about, or things, sort of particular prayer requests that you would put before us that we can partner with you in prayer, even at this distance?
Workwise, just for wisdom for all of us with all the Rockland team, as we try and figure out exactly how to proceed with all the unknowns. For our family, for the kids, you know, obviously the transition from Pakistan to Malaysia was a rough one, rougher for some children than for others. And they have built some really great friendships with their classmates here now, especially Sam, our eldest. So we really hate to see those ripped away. As an MK myself, I know just how once those walls go up of how you build friendships and how you build relationships, once those go up, it's really hard to take them down. And I'd appreciate if my children didn't have to go through that same process that I did. So yeah, just for them to be protected through the turmoil, and ideally for them to be able to come back to these friendships. That would be, again, the master plan. But yeah, just and that we would be good role models for them in our faith and in leading them through all of this. It's easy, especially when you're kind of in these kind of close confines, to fall into patterns that just don't necessarily display Christ's love in the best ways. So just, that they would see that in us, even when we might not be portraying it very well.
Whether you're in Malaysia or Canada or the UK or Pakistan or wherever it is, the challenges of being a mom, being a dad, in particular with 4 young kids at home in the midst of a global pandemic. Now that's a new twist for most of us. But they are challenging times, and we certainly do pray for you and pray for the best for you and your family. Did you have anything to add to that, Matt, or does that kind of sum that up?
Yeah, I mean, just for me, I mean, just for faith to go on trusting God, you know, it is scary, and I do worry about the impact on the kids in particular, all this uncertainty and moving around the world, and you know, so just for faith to go on trusting God day by day, that that he knows the best for us, and his his plans for us are good.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of practical challenges with this situation. I mean, finance is bound to be an issue. We live by faith, we live on support, and that's dependent on people in the West usually. So that's going to be a challenge. It's possible we'll be in Canada this summer for a period because of our visa situation. So, we'll probably end up, there'll be practical challenges in Canada, where to stay and needing a car and all that kind of boring stuff like that. But mostly, just to go on trusting God day by day and having faith that is bigger than all the scary situations we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So if people wanted to sort of keep up with what you guys are doing and what the visa situation is and everything that you're facing, again, I get your newsletter. If people wanted to connect with you, how would they do that? I could certainly tell my people, if they're watching this, say, if you contact the office, we will put you in touch with Matt and Andrea, absolutely. But if they wanted to contact you directly or get on your newsletter list, how would they do that?
Yeah, so they can email us or email me. I'll just say that it's mattjvaughan@gmail.com is my email address.
With modern technology, I will even put that on the screen for you.
Yeah, you can type out that. That'd be great. Yeah, numbers at the bottom of the screen or whatever they do.
Right. Yeah, it's just right down there. There it is.
We also have a Facebook group, so people are on Facebook. We have a kind of it's quite secret for security reasons, but we post a lot of stuff there. That's obviously more up to date than prayer letters, so we do that pretty regularly. So you can find us on Facebook, or then we can send a link. I think Paul and Val Reynolds are probably in that group at your church, so they can get us there.
Yeah.
That's kind of where, if there's an emergency, or, if one of the kids says something excessively cute, or,
Sure.
occasionally we'll do family videos, not like a look at our child stacking blocks, but, children talking about things that they've done in Malaysia or people they've met or things like that. But also just, for instance, if we fly, it'll often have details about when we're flying, or sort of more up-to-date prayer things that are more minute by minute. When Daniel was in hospital over Christmas, that was really the only way we could get in touch with our supporters to get them to pray.
Yeah. Well, it's much more immediate than even email is now, right? I mean, just put it on Facebook and people are seeing it often within a few moments, if not, a few minutes or hours. So, listen, it's been so wonderful catching up with you guys. So sorry that you're facing the uncertainty, and yet so glad to know that you are seeing and knowing God's presence with you through the uncertainty, even in the midst of the panic. Trusting God isn't about everything being serene and wonderful all the time. Sometimes it's difficult to put one step in front of the other and to trust that He is leading you to a good place. And so thank you for sharing some of your story, your struggles. And I just know that we are praying for you and continue to pray for you. And so maybe I can just do that for you and for us now. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for Matt and Andrea, their kids, their family. You are a good God. You have brought Matt and Andrea together. You have led them to wonderful places like Pakistan and now Malaysia. And Lord, there are challenges. Of course, there are challenges. Everyone is facing challenges, and particularly in these days. But Lord, I pray that your grace, your peace, which the scripture says passes understanding, would rest upon them, and that they would be able to continue to walk with you, to follow you. Lord, we do pray just an extra amount of just protection over their children. Lord, as they go through these formative years, Lord, I pray that you would give them such a strong sense of home and belonging with Matt and Andrea, such a strong sense of your presence and your grace and love with them, that whatever their external circumstances may be, that you will see them through, and that your love and grace will continue to guide them throughout their lives. Lord, we pray for all of the circumstances that we've heard about today, for visas, for Rockland School, for Matt's communications work with InterServe. Lord, we ask your blessing upon your children, your family. And we thank you for this time where we can catch up with one another. We pray these things, we bring them before you in the name of our Lord Jesus. Amen. So again, guys, thank you so much. It's been great, and I know we had planned to maybe for you to be with us at St. Andrews in person this summer, and who knows, maybe that could still happen, and we'd love for that to happen whenever you're in the neighborhood. But if that's not going to be for a while yet, I'm glad we've had this chance to catch up and to hear what's going on with you. So God's blessings on you, and just again, thanks so much for this. It's been wonderful.
Thanks.
Thanks.